How's it going, fellas? Triarius Wargaming here, back again with a hobby update. I've completed Spartan and Mercenary Hoplites, around 250 of them again. So what I'm going to talk to you today in this video, we've got, first off, we'll do the showcase, showing off all the different Hoplites and that I've completed. And then at the end of the video, I know this one is like 40-ish minutes long. We'll do the showcase first, and I'll take you through the figures. I did a lot, again, 250 in this batch. And then I kind of have all my hobby logs that I never really uploaded at the end. So if you want to look through the process, how I pulled the armies together, those will be at the end of the video. But enough of this screen. What we'll do is we'll get into the armies. I'll talk you through, what I've been up to. All right, here we go. Starting from the Spartan side of the wing, you can see we got 3 units of Spartan hoplites. We've got the various Spartan heroes that are used into the strongest to reroll attacks, basically. Out in front are the Echidroimoi. So these were the younger age classes, and they would actually be hoplites, and then they would be called out to run forward and drive off skirmishers. And then moving through what I'm calling the mercenary hoplites. Not that anything especially makes them mercenaries, but I just I don't know. They're giving me mercenary vibes when I was painting them up. And in the back, you can see I've done a bunch of commanders as well. So 2 Spartan command stands, and then 4 sort of generic Greek stands, although one of the stands is actually a Theban stand, so not exactly generic, but the other 3 are kind of generic stands. So I'll talk you through these units in a little more detail, and the manufacturers and everything. So yeah, we'll start off talking about the Spartans mainly. We'll start with some of the command stands. So here you have the first command stand where you can see he's sacrificing a lamb. Now, this actually happened at the Battle of Plataea. The Spartans needed to get into action, and the Persians were actively attacking them, but they could not attack until they got the proper sacrifices. So here you have the Spartan commander basically being passed lamb after lamb. He's sacrificing them, and the omens are wrong. Meanwhile, the Persians are raining down arrows. So that was a Foundry figure, and I just had to include it. So here's our second base. All of these figures, except for the trumpeter, are from Gorgon Studios. I really love those figures. The Gorgon ones are definitely kind of Persian Wars era, I would say, whereas the Foundry stuff is more Peloponnesian War era in terms of the equipment. I did mix the two together. Now, the big difference is that famous Corinthian helmet that most of the figures in that base are wearing kind of started to go out of style by the Peloponnesian Wars and was replaced, not just in Sparta, but all over Greece, by that conical helmet. At least the conical helmet was much more common. As far as sources we have for Spartan appearance, we have some written accounts and some images. So this first statue, I think, is a great example. You can see the long hair flowing out from under the helmet. The Spartans were supposed to wear their hair long. And then you can also see this style of cloak that the Spartans were wearing. Both these styles, the long hair and the cloak, were not actually uniquely Spartan at first. These were basically cultural elements from archaic Greece, but the Spartans clung on to those fashions of long hair and the long cloak, while as the rest of Greece, ditched those archaic fashions and moved to a shorter cloak and shorter hairstyles. The previous figure was actually from Sparta. This figure is from the Isle of Samos, but it does show an archaic Greek warrior, and you can see the long plaited hair. And the Spartans they didn't look like hobos with the long hair, which I feel like miniatures sometimes exaggerate. They didn't look like unkept hobos. They did take great care with their appearance, maintaining the beards, maintaining the long hair. They didn't just, run around with unkept beards and hair. They took a lot of pride in their appearance, and even, before the Battle of Thermopylae, right, the Persians are shocked that the Spartans are oiling and combing their hair. Okay, last in terms of our primary sources, so these images are basically contemporary to the Persian wars. They come from the Siphaean treasury at Delphi. So here you can see those kind of archaic era warriors. And again, this was kind of inspiration for me, the long hair flowing down from the helmets, that kind of thing. This is what I was kind of picturing in my mind. Now, my Spartan army, I didn't really go pure Persian wars, but I didn't really go 100% maybe Peloponnesian wars accuracy. I kind of mixed the two. Now, there's pros and cons. I mean, bottom line is I'm not collecting 5 different Greek armies for every period. We just have basically one Greek army. So here you can see the long hair flowing out from the helmets, which is a look I really wanted to do. I did do a mix of dark hair, but also lighter hair colors as well, but the predominant hair color was dark, but a mix of browns and blondes in there as well. In terms of figures, they're probably about 60% Foundry, and then the remainder Gorgon Studios, and then Victrix as well. And the great thing about all those manufacturers is you can make some really great characters. I'm really kind of proud of how this army came out due to like all the different characters that I think really bring these units to life. Personally, I don't think any Spartan should look exactly the same as another. They were maybe more uniform than other Greek city-states, but they were still, fundamentally individuals. For the shields, I did do a mix of designs. I did some with the classic lambda, and I did others with kind of personal designs. I'm happy with the look. I think it looks good. I did want to depict them as sort of uniform in some ways, but also as very unique individuals as well. So the evidence for the Spartan lambda shields, there isn't any direct evidence. There is some indirect evidence, and I won't get into the debate on that, but there is a debate somewhat about the Spartan shield designs. The tunics, I did them basically almost all in red tunics except for the musicians. And again, Spartans, once they graduated from the agoge or upbringing, they were issued with a red cloak when they were ready for military service. Now, it is technically a red cloak, not a red tunic, but again, the red tunic is just so Spartan. I had to do it. The trumpeter, or the horn players, flute players, more properly, those I left in white tunics because they looked like youths to me, and they would not have been graduated into the military yet in that way, if that makes sense. They wouldn't have been awarded the red cloak if they were still a youth. And I believe Spartans did not actually leave Sparta's borders in military service until the age of 21, if I'm not mistaken. It's definitely older than 18. It's something like 21 before they were actually eligible to be soldiers. One last thing on the shields, actually, Xenophon actually does write that the Spartans were required to have bronze-faced shields. So I did try and make sure all the shields had at least some bronze on them, and they were required to have those bronze shields. And actually, Xenophon, in a different work in his Anabasis, he describes the 10,000 mercenaries fighting for Persia in that story as looking like a wall of bronze and crimson, which is what I wanted my Spartans to look like. And there were a big Spartan contingent in that 10,000. So a kind of wall of bronze and crimson. From the literary evidence, that is kind of what I was going for with my guys. The Spartans were also known uniquely among the Greeks to be well disciplined enough that they didn't march to the blaring of horns, but they marched to the sound of the flutes, the aulos flutes. Gorgon Studios, they do some really nice flute players, so I wanted to include those in there as well. Rather than your typical trumpeter, you have them marching to battle to the tune of the flutes. And actually, what's cool is I found some modern reconstruction, so I I threw in here a flute player so you can kind of imagine what it sounded like as they were marching to war here. So that was Callum Armstrong playing that. If you want to find the full clip, it is on YouTube if you search like Greek flute, Callum Armstrong or something like that. So these guys out in front are the Echidromoi. So basically there were certain battles that the Spartans really struggled to deal with skirmishers, and some of the biggest defeats that the Spartans suffered were at the hands of light armed troops. So the most famous one is the Battle of Sphacteria, which was an island where about 300 Spartans, something along that line, maybe 300 to 600, I forget off the top of my head. Basically, they're faced with a lot of light troops and they just can't do anything about it. So the Echidromoi, basically the idea behind them was they were the under 30s. So the men under 30 from the ranks would be called forward to run out and chase off skirmishers. So they'd basically break formation and try and run down the skirmishers, drive them off. So To the Strongest rules, which I mainly use, has some special rules for the Echidromoi. So I thought might as well include a couple units of them, and they might be useful for some different scenarios or what have you. Just, you got to have that complete Spartan army. All right, so now on to what I've been kind of calling my mercenary hoplites. And there's nothing in particular that really makes them mercenaries. They just were giving me mercenary vibes as I was painting them and pulling the units together and whatever. So these are the so-called mercenaries. They're just kind of generic hoplites, mainly a mix of Foundry, Lucid, and of course Victrix. The one, I basically most of my other units I've been mixing armored and unarmored. I don't think the Greeks would have had them separated. For these ones, I did do one unit of kind of more armored guys and then put the unarmored guys kind of in another unit. So not a ton to say about these guys, but what I will say is that one really nice thing about doing a ancient Greek army is there's just so many good manufacturers out there. So the Victrix figures, especially the newer Hoplite set, the older ones are fine, like they're not bad, but the newer Hoplite set I love. But Foundry, the World of the Greeks range, is awesome. Gorgon Studios, there's some of their Etruscan hoplites mixed in here, which are basically, they're archaic Greek hoplites is what they really are. And Foundry, of course, I absolutely love, and the Lucid figures too. And I have a size comparison and stuff later in this video, but it's kind of interesting. A lot of the figures were sculpted by Steve Sala, but in these different companies, he has a very different style of miniature. So we have the generals. So here's our first general. Two of the figures are Foundry, and then one is a Victrix. So the guy in the blue helmet is the Victrix, the trumpeter. So I didn't do trumpeters mainly in these units because I didn't have enough. I mean, I guess I could have made more, but I did mainly the trumpeters on the command stands. Now I do think this base shows that, I mean, I mixed Victrix and Foundry throughout the project, but I think on this base you can really see that the Victrix and Foundry go really, really well together, which is nice. I mean, sometimes they just don't at all, but I think they're very, very mixable, the Foundry and Victrix Greeks. All right, so onto our next command stand. The guy in the middle is a Lucid Eye, and then the rest are Foundry. The Lucid Eye guy is a little taller and lankier, and I think you can kind of see that in the picture. He's not like the other Lucid Eye hoplites. He's significantly taller, but I think it works fine on this base. I think they look great together. I really like this one. This is, I think, my favorite of the bases. All right, now we've got either Epaminondas or Pelopidas, or perhaps even Pagondas, Theban commanders. And the Thebans were really known for fighting in the front lines and unfortunately dying as well in battle. But he'll lead my Thebans. And he's their Foundry, but the figure in the front is Victrix with a Aventine head conversion. Right now we got the final commander, last but not least, drinking the coffee, or whatever the ancient Greek equivalent of coffee was. So this is, guys, slightly my self-insert figure, because if you know me at work, which obviously none of you do, but it's kind of almost a meme at work that I'm always drinking coffee from my coffee mug, and of course I'm a teacher. Of course, these students roast me for it or have all kinds of comments about me constantly drinking coffee all day. So that's kind of my dude, drinking the coffee. And these figures are, of course, from Foundry. And it was really awesome doing this project because the Foundry World of the Greeks range is probably my favorite overall miniature range, like, ever. All right, so where are we at with figure painting for the year? So it's early March at this point, March 3rd. And so far I've completed 516 figures. So pretty pleased about that. And we're gonna keep on trucking. We're kind of at the daylight is at the end of the tunnel with the Greeks. Basically what remains to be done is cavalry, skirmishers, and then the camps, and then we're done with the bulk of the ancient Greeks. So as we go cruising into March, what I did want to do is give you a little bit of the behind the scenes for this project. So I did film a bunch of stuff, but I just didn't make it in any uploads February. I just didn't upload any videos. That's me being a very bad YouTuber. So what I do have for you is I have all the behind the scenes stuff leading up to that little showcase. So what I did want to do, I'll talk you through the size comparisons of all the different manufacturers for this one. And then also I have a little segment about how I kind of go about basing up these projects. I know the big red bat bases are always kind of a popular discussion topic and whatnot. So we'll start with the size comparisons. So as you're going to make your own Greek hoplite army or Spartan army, I thought I might as well just go over some of the kits I used and do a little size comparison, which might be helpful to you. So here we go. On the first stick, we have 2 Foundry and 2 Victrix. So it goes Foundry, Foundry, Victrix, Foundry, Victrix. So the Victrix are a little bigger, but actually when you put them next to each other, they are both within the human range, I would say. The Victrix ones are maybe, in human terms, like half a head taller at most, I would say, than the Foundry, and maybe a little chunkier than the Foundry guys. And I think they blend in very well together in person. Now, one thing about the Victrix guys is the Spartan heads in particular, I thought were verging on kind of the cartoonish. They're very big and over-exaggerated heads, in my opinion. So if that bothers you, you know, it bothers you. But I think personally they actually fit in well together. So that's the Foundry Spartans plus the Victrix unarmored guys. So if you're curious about how the new Victrix figures fit in, I have a stand of those. All right, so here we have the the Foundry metal hoplites right in front. And then we've got the Victrix new plastic hoplite kit that just came out behind. So again, they're slightly larger, maybe this time about a head or so larger, but I still think they mix in fine. I mean, there's definitely slightly bigger, but it's not, I don't think it's a problem to mix them. And I fully, I've been mixing them all together. And I think one thing that makes, so the Victrix ones definitely are chunkier, but I think one thing that makes them appear a little taller is the helmets and the crests are just a little more exaggerated. And the bodies are just a little beefier all around. All right, now adding in there, we've got the Gorgon hoplites, the Gorgon Spartans from Gorgon Studios or Gorgon Miniatures, whatever they're called now. They are about the same height or so as the Foundry Spartans, but they are chunkier and sometimes a little more exaggerated. So one thing that is so they're just a little thicker all around everywhere. But one thing you'll notice is the swords on these are way over exaggerated. And then if you compare it to a Foundry sword, so here's a Foundry sword. The Foundry sword is way more realistic than the giant machete or whatever that this guy has. So interestingly enough, they're both these figures, they're sculpted by Steve Sala, but for different manufacturers. And yeah, the Gorgon ones, I mean, they're similar, but they're definitely, I would consider to be a different sort of style than the Foundry ones. The Foundry ones are very, I think, realistically sculpted. The Gorgon ones are just slightly more on the heroic scale. All right, and then the last manufacturer we have present that I'll show you is the Lucid Greeks from, again, these are also sculpted by Steve Sala, but they are on his website, his new website, and they're sold under the Lucid Ziggurat range. So these, I would say, again, they're comparable, but these ones are actually a very different sculpting style, again, to both the Foundry and the Gorgon. So these ones are definitely much more lanky in size. So they're a little taller and they're just a little, skinnier, I guess. They're not as chunky and hefty as the Gorgons. And they're actually, I would say, taller than both. Taller than the Foundry, just kind of sort of more exaggerated proportions, but also at the same time lankier as well. So bigger, but maybe more realistically proportioned. Well, so I think they all work really well together, but they're definitely a very different style. And now the last figure here is another Steve Sala one, and this is again from his Ziggurat range, but this is kind of one of the heroes. And this one is even taller than the other Ziggurat hoplites. So this guy is probably pushing the 32 millimeter scale. So taller, but also kind of more lanky, long limbs and stuff. But anyways, I think the figures look beautiful, so they're awesome. All right, here we have all the Hoplite stuff laid out on the table. So what are we dealing with here? So over here we have the Spartan forces. So we should have enough for about 3 units of hoplites, 2 units of Ekadroimoi, and I'm probably pronouncing those wrong, but those are guys who kind of, the younger age classes who ran out of the phalanx to chase off skirmishers. And then we've got, should have enough for some command as well. So that in this area should be somewhere around 140-ish figures, unless I did my math terribly wrong, which may well be the case. We got the transfers, so a pretty good number are going to be having this classic Spartan shield lambda transfers, and then half of them are going to be a mixed bag. So I'm not really a believer that the ancient Greek armies were organized in any way that we would recognize. The lambda shields, actually this came up on a video by JVC Paints, and basically, you know, someone was calling him out for using these when there isn't a lot of evidence. Yeah, I think the evidence is mixed, but it's just such a classic Spartan look. Might as well include them so people know that they're Spartans. And I'll talk more about some of the painting ideas and, you know, why I made some decisions that I did and etc. There's some light conversion work too in this army. But anyways, once we get to the finished product, I'll talk about why I picked what I did. All right. So now we have the remaining hoplites before. So what I got to do is I got to do a head count of these figures to see how many we're actually dealing with, how many units we can get out of these. So these are guys you didn't fit into other units or, you know, whatever. I was always planning on doing more than what I already showed too. These are some new orders that I just kind of, you know, they took a while. They were kind of a late arriving. These are from Lucid and Gorgon Studios. And yeah, more of these, the dribs and drabs and whatever. So we got all that. And then we've got dudes from, these are my first guys that I ever painted in Wargaming ever. Fair to say I had no idea what I was doing, but it would be kind of cool to include these. The painting standard is low, but, you know, if they're mixed into the mob, you probably won't notice. But those are the better ones that I picked out. Here we got some commanders that we'll do up. These are again, this was a different era of wargaming for me when I was doing smaller units in terms of the unit footprint. So this is probably like a, what's that rule set? I'm forgetting. But anyways, impetus, that's it. This is kind of maybe more like an impetus size unit. But yeah, these were supposed to be like Southern Italian hoplites. They're, you know, some of them have the, you know, Italian helmet stuck on. They might get integrated into the forces. I might bulk out a, you know, Italian hoplite unit. We'll see on that. These are similar to these ones. These are, again, the first miniatures I ever got when I got into historical wargaming. Victrix, I think, had just released these. These are like the Athenian hoplites. The paint, did I know what the heck I was doing with the painting? Absolutely not. We'll see where we can maybe mix these in. Again, the quality is pretty low on these. So, you know, they won't really stand up. They don't really hold a candle to, I think, what I'm doing now. But we'll see maybe where we can fit some in for kind of like old time's sake. They might need some cleaning up. All right, and these boxes, we've got stuff from the Ajima Miniatures Etruscans Kickstarter. Now, these are going to go into some different projects, but what I may do is I may use some of these to bulk out this unit, depending on how much we've got, since these really do have that Italian look. I'm not sure how I feel about mixing in the really like the Italo-Corinthian helmets into the standard Greeks. I mean, I think for Southern Italians and Sicilians, that's great. But for the mainland Greeks, I don't know, it just looks a little off to me, I think. So we might do up some of these guys quickly and mix them in, and might as well just get that done and get some Italian mercenaries done. That might be kind of cool. Then those would be, I mean, they might actually be pretty fitting for this Syracuse project. But I think they'd also work really good in like a Pyrrhic army, potentially. Yeah, unfortunately at Aventine, I could not, they used to make these like Italian hoplites. I just could not find them on the website, and the website's closed anyways, but I was really hoping to get some of those, but whatever. So what we'll do, that's what we've got here in store. I think the first order of business here is to get all the Spartan shields done. Get the Spartan shields done. Tally up what we've got here. What are we working with? And then, you know, we'll go from there. All right. So I'll see you very soon. All right. So we're at the next step. So what I've done is I've actually applied all the shield transfers and then put a coat of matte varnish over the figures. So that's our next step. I also actually, I based up the heroes and the command stands just to make sure that they didn't get mixed into the regular troops once the basing begun, or there weren't figures left over, stuff like that. So they're all varnished, or the shield transfers are all applied, and then I let them sit overnight, and then I apply the varnish. I find it's easier for me to do things in these mass steps. Like, it's easier just to do all the shield transfers at once, boom, then do all of the varnishing at once, boom. So the next step is, now that they're varnished, and I do wish I got more of the Spartan shield transfers. About 50% of the Spartans have the transfers. I should have probably gotten another pack, I think, of the Lambda shields, but whatever. They didn't go quite as far as I kind of anticipated, but I think the units will look fine once they're together. But anyways, the next step is I'm going to be applying a very light wash over the shields, and the first thing it does is it helps actually blend in, I think, the shield transfers to the base color, because the colors never quite match. So that light wash, that will blend the transfer into the shield. And then also the Aspis Hoplite shield, it does have that rim to it. So the wash will just add a little shadow under the rim, which is an effect I quite like. And then it also will just make the shield look a little more battle worn, a little more used. So I think that'll be good. So that's the next step. What we'll do after that is I'm gonna paint in all of the bases on the dudes, because I do the multi-basing. So what we'll do is we'll paint all the bases, like the bases that are cast on. We'll paint those an earthy color, and then I'm actually gonna stick some static grass on there as well, I think. And that will help once they're being multi-based. You don't have to try and gunk under them. All right, so I'm gonna go for a walk. What we'll get to next is we'll take care of all of that, and then I've started to get my basing set up here. So what we're gonna do is we got 3 units of Spartan hoplites, and then 2 sort of groups of the echidromoi, so the guys who kind of run out from the phalanx to chase off skirmishers. So those small bases will be the echidromoi. And then we're gonna do 3 bases of what I'm kind of calling like mercenary hoplites. So these guys are gonna be all of the mercenary hoplites. And so I'll take you through the basing. What I tend to do is I put on a front rank, paint in some of the basing material, let it dry, put on the next rank, etc. So if you're curious, for the varnish, I use this stuff. Winsor & Newton Galeria matte varnish. This is the product that I've had the most success with overall in terms of the finish and protection and also the quality. Some other varnishes, one of my older videos, I literally ruined an army with the varnish not drying correctly. So this I use as a brush on matte varnish, and I usually use like a big brush like this, like not a miniature painting brush. And the main thing you want to look for is you just want to make sure the hairs are kind of soft. Sometimes you get the larger brushes and they're the hairs are more bristly, I guess. And the problem with those is they can kind of scratch up the models. So you just want to make sure when you're getting the bigger brush, it is the soft bristle type, not the harder bristles that some brushes do. Or if it's an older brush, sometimes the bristles harden up. All right, so I'm gonna go for a walk and then we'll get to the basing, or we'll get to the next stage of the preparation. Okay, so last night we got all the shields done, basically. The shields and the basing, so you can see that I have preemptively painted the little stands that the figures are cast on, and then put some flock on there. I touched up the spears and stuff. So the Spartans are all basically all ready to go. So you would move them over from this side to the other side once they're done. I didn't get the regular hoplites done because I kind of ran out of time. But I think the plan is we're gonna do some basing. I want to talk you through kind of my basing methods and strategy, whatever, and we'll start getting the Spartans based up, and then we'll work on these guys. And luckily, I have the time this month, right at the end of the month here. Actually, I'm recording this now in March. So in the start of March, I got lucky having a couple days where I could just really have some me time. Sometimes you just got to take advantage of those moments and strike while the iron is hot. You know, when you have a couple days where you can just work on stuff, you know, work on it. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at kind of my approach to basing, and then we'll go from there. All right, so now I know the light is not great here right at this time to show you what I'm doing, but basically my starting point for basing is I like to pick out, basically, so we're doing 3 units of the hoplites, and you'll see I like to put, these days my kind of standard is 3 of these bases across, and they're gonna be 4, basically 9 across, 4 deep on these bases. What I like to do is I like to start out with the central base, and that's kind of what I see as the command base, and I like to have a cool leader if I can at the start. So normally I would have maybe a standard on this base too. The Greeks are interesting because they didn't use standard bearers in this time period. They actually don't until after Alexander and after beating the Persians. But what I like to do is pick the character figures and then build kind of a central diorama and then build the unit outwards. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put on the first 2 ranks, let the glue dry, put on some basing material, and then do the rear 2 ranks and do the same process. So what I've done, and I know it's a little hard to see here with the light at the moment, but what I've done is I've pulled out some of the stands that have some different kind of officers and characters on them, and then I'll build out the central base and work from the inside out so we get the cool officers and whatnot leading the units. So I played around with some different options and I decided these are going to be my 3 unit commanders. So I kind of picked the guys with the transverse crests to be the unit leaders. I mean, the transverse crest was definitely a Spartan thing, and there's some evidence, and a lot of the evidence for this period is a little lacking, let's just say that, but there's some evidence to suggest that the Spartans were the ones who actually invented it. Now, was this actually used by
commander specifically and not the rank and file. There's no actual like source that says it, but you know, rule of cool and all that. So I picked out a leader for each unit, and now we're going to kind of build around them and add some of the secondary figures to the central base. Now, the leaders are a little static, but you know, what can you do there? I don't know. We might have one unit a little more aggressive command versus the standing command. We might even play around with a little bit more, but what we'll do is we'll add some figures and see where we go from there. All right, so we have these central command figures picked out. I went through a couple options, and this is what I landed on. Now, this might change as we go forward, but the next step is I'm going to fill in the rest of the ranks and the first two ranks, and so we'll go from there. I also picked out, some leaders for the Echidromoi guys who run out from the phalanx to chase off the skirmishers. Now, I do have quite a few other characters. One thing, this Spartan collection is heavily metal. And there's pros and cons with that. I mean, I think one pro at least is lots of characters. So we should have lots of characters sprinkled through this army. All right, so here is where we are at. So I've put the first two ranks on the phalanx units. Now, it might be tempting, and I've kind of thought about just putting on one rank and then putting on the basing material before the second rank. The problem is that you need to kind of have the front two ranks line up with their spears. And if you get the first rank locked in place and then you find that the second rank figures won't mix in, you're going to be in trouble. So that's why I like to put the first two ranks in, especially because they're in that kind of phalanx formation with the spears. I will just put it as an aside, there is some debate if you are interested in the Hoplite world, like where the spears used overarm, underarm, a mix. I think to me, the evidence is pretty clear that at least in the phalanx formation, the spears were used overhand because that's the only way that you can really have them coordinated together. So we put the first two ranks in. What we'll do is we'll let the glue dry, and then we'll come back at it, put on some basing material. I also did the Echidromoi, so I couldn't quite fit 12 of the figures on the base, but these, again, they were normally part of the phalanx. They were the Spartans who were under the age of 30, and if the Spartan phalanx was basically faced with peltasts, who the Spartans tended to struggle to deal with, they would send out the younger men to kind of run out of the phalanx and chase them off. So the To the Strongest rules has some rules for the Echidromoi, so I thought I might as well paint up, do a couple units of those just to be complete. Now, would they really feature in the main big battles? Probably not. They're more of kind of, on some of the smaller conflicts, and I say that, relatively speaking. So they're probably more for specific scenarios is what I'm trying to say, rather than your straight up punch up. But yeah, what we'll do is we'll come back, we'll let that glue dry. I'm going to do something else for a while, and then we'll get that basing material on and then put on the second rank. All right, well, a slight progress update. So I actually, as well as doing the first two ranks of the Spartans, I thought I might as well just go ahead and do the first two ranks of the mercenary, or what I'm calling the mercenary hoplites as well, just because it takes time for glue to dry anyways, and then it takes time for the basing materials to dry. So why not just get it all the first ranks done, and then I can put the basing on at the same time, let that dry, and then just do all of the back ranks as well. So I built these units up basically the same way as I did the Spartans. So I picked a leader figure like that guy with the red spiral shield. He's kind of the leader of that unit. This guy with the green cloak and the axe was the leader for that unit, and so on. So a few less kind of characters with these dudes, but this base I have actually quite a few commanders on the center base, maybe the highest number of commanders in a unit, but that's just because I had these extra command figures left over. I guess I could have made another command base, but whatever. I just decided to make a little vignette, I guess, in the unit. They're arguing about their orders, I guess, something like that. All right, so that's what we got here. We're gonna let that glue dry, and then we'll get on with the basing. So it's now time to start to apply the basing paste, or whatever you want to call it. So for this project, this is the first time I've used this product from AK. I've used in the past the Vallejo stuff, but for whatever reason, I think I went to order it off Amazon. I couldn't find it, and then this is what my local game store has in stock. So I decided to try this. So I used it on the previous stuff. And what I found is this batch that I got was a little difficult to work with. So this is kind of the consistency that we're dealing with. I grab the brush here so you can kind of see, but very like firm consistency, which makes it quite hard to spread. Whereas the Vallejo stuff like spreads really easily. So what I've been doing is I have to mix water into it to actually get it to, like, mix water and churn it up to actually get it spreadable. So I'm curious if that's actually how it's supposed to be, or if it was just this tub that was like that. And I know this one's been open for a while, but it was like that that was the same consistency when I first opened it. So I got another one because despite I didn't love this product. I mean, I think it's fine. It did have that drawback. I do want to keep this army consistent, or have all my Greeks be the same color basing. So I am curious about the other batch, if it's the same way. Yeah, so I opened the other batch, and you can see it is the same like solid putty. It's almost like silly putty consistency. So yeah, this stuff, I mean, buyer beware. Like, look, it can stick it in, and it's like, I mean, it is sticking to my finger a little bit, but that's not the like consistency that I would really expect. And it makes it kind of hard to, being so firm, it actually makes it kind of difficult to spread as because it just requires more like force. So you do really need to like churn it up, mix it with water to get a spreadable consistency. All right, so we're at the stage of the project where I really love this part, because the figures really start to come to life, in my opinion. So we put on the first layer of the basing material. So the next step is we got to put the back ranks in, and then the final layer of basing material. So tonight for me, I think it's going to be a little bit of a later night. Basically, it's back to reality tomorrow. So I'll do the showcase, record the showcase footage tomorrow morning, and then everything really has to be cleaned up and packed away and everything like that tomorrow. But when you have the window of opportunity, you just got to take advantage of it. So I had the time right now where I could just be as messy and just do a ton of figures, and we took advantage of it. And then we gotta get back to the regular swing of things tomorrow. All right, so next update, we should be basically almost completed with the units.